So, I was watching Doctor Strange just now for the second time in, I want to say, a month. And an idea came to me. A thought, rather. Doctor Strange was once a renowned neurosurgeon. Till he had an accident that wrecked his hands. One moment, please. And then, of course, he seeks out a place to learn how to potentially heal his hand so he can go back to being a neurosurgeon, right? As we all know. Becomes a sorcerer, learns magic, yada yada yada. Given how sorry, that bird's distracting me. I don't know if you can hear it. I think it's a crow. Um, given how he spent years as a doctor, as a surgeon, as a neurosurgeon, as a neurosurgeon who would only take certain cases that he thought were challenging. Why? This is a live stream. I'm talking to my respective viewers. If you're not keen on that, then please leave. That goes for both of you. Um, please leave. Or you will be muted. Enjoy that time out. I will not tolerate such conversations on this channel. Getting back to it, why is it that when Strange becomes a sorcerer and and then eventually Sorcerer Supreme, why does he lose? Why does he completely change into a different person? I understand his eyes have been opened to truths he never knew were real. He understands that, you know, reality is subjective, that sort of thing. But surely with magic, he could still perform surgeries. And surely he would have continued being a curious person who liked a challenge, who wanted to be the best at something and flaunt about it. Flaunt flaunt it, however you say that. Christian, how are you? It's just a little something I wanted to say at the beginning of this stream. He goes from hello, Luna. Um, being obsessed with puzzles, and in all honesty, Stephen Strange is basically Marvel's Gregory House. Especially in the movie. The only difference being that Dr. House is a diagnostician, and Stephen Strange, Doctor Strange, is a neurosurgeon. But they both seem to like a challenge, and I would imagine puzzles as well. Yet he seems to lose that part of himself when he's engrossed himself in the world of the mystic arts. Why is that? I mean, Tony Stark doesn't stop being Tony Stark after he has his experience in the cave and becomes Iron Man. He's still snarky. He's still capable of coming off as a jerk. But the only difference is that we now know that deep down, the seemingly bad boy persona was pretty much just that. He actually was a compassionate human being deep down. But Stephen Strange becomes a straight up good guy. He loses that jerk aspect of himself. Which it just doesn't make any sense to me. He should have kept that. But that's not the point of this stream. Let's get into the topic. What if Tony Stark wasn't Iron Man? Apologies for the birds in the background. I have no control over that. What if, after getting out of that cave, Tony Stark decides not only will I no longer build weapons for the military, for anybody, but I also won't build a weaponized, roboticized suit of armor either, because that is a weapon. What if it went so far as to make him disgusted with all weapons? And so he decided to instead build suits for people with certain medical problems, cybernetic prosthetics, um, maybe suits for construction workers, um, welders, um, miners, astronauts, and suits to allow people to survive in areas where they otherwise couldn't, so as to allow scientists to explore those areas more thoroughly. Would he still build something for himself? Because the irony of Tony's story is that he believes the safest hands are his own. But this is the guy who's got a drinking problem. This is the guy who can be pretty reckless. This is the guy who doesn't really take no for an answer, pretty much does whatever he thinks is right because in his mind only he can be right. If the whole point of his experience in the cave was to open his eyes and make him turn over a new leaf, why did that lead to this idea that the weapons I build will now only be in my hands, and all of that technology will be put into making a highly advanced suit that is quite literally capable of taking out some of the most advanced military weapons in existence. Doesn't that make Tony a bit of a hypocrite? Shouldn't he have instead just made the Iron Man suit and not put missiles on it? Maybe keep the repulsors for, uh, you know, some form of offense. Its ability to fly. But no, guns built into it. You remember how on the shoulders or close to the neck, it had like these. I hesitate to call them machine guns, but functionally that's what they were. That popped up and you know took out those terrorists who were threatening or members of the Ten Rings that were threatening those innocent people. How he had a missile launcher that could that would come out of his out of the suit's arm. Couldn't he have just built the suit without the weapons? Or build a version of the suit that doesn't have the weapons, save for the repulsors, and keeps a version of that armor that does have the weapons locked away only to be used under certain circumstances. surely his know-how and the Iron Man suits could be used for more than just weapons, or could be built as more than just weapons. So why didn't he do that? Is it because he needed something that was still familiar territory, just much different? And when called in by, I believe it was the Senate or Congress, in Iron Man 2, to hand over the suit because, it is a weapon. It is quite powerful, and that sort of power should not be in the possession of a single person. Why didn't Tony work with them to forge a sort of agreement or put something into law stating, I don't know, I'll mass produce these for you for every branch of the military. But you will agree to certain terms so that we can ensure these weapons never fall into the wrong hands again. You will deal with me personally because I know there are individuals in my company who don't share my vision. Wouldn't that have been enough? Maybe even communicate with Nick Fury later in that movie and say to him, get him involved somehow and say, hey, can you help me with this? They're breathing down my neck. They want me to continue building weapons, but, Iron Man suits for the military to use. Maybe the other part of the agreement could have been that Tony gets to keep one for himself. And he could, in secret, make his personal Iron Man suits more advanced than what the military has. And then in time, number one, he would not have to worry about losing Rhodey's trust. Rhodey would be on board with him. Rhodey would see to it that things were on the up and up, right? And then Justin Hammer never gets any contracts through the U.S. military. And he can't foul things up. Did Tony, in a way, kind of become a villain? He was so obsessed with keeping all that technology for himself as he continues to upgrade it and make it more powerful with each iteration, right? Every main armor is much more powerful than the last. We all, of course, see how this occurs in the movies, right? How he goes from barely being able to taking on Stain in a rebuilt Mark One. Like, he almost doesn't make it out of that. To then, by the time of Iron Man 2, taking out a bunch of hammer drones, basic, or shall we say, unmanned suits that, were his attempt to sort of copy the Iron Man tech. And yes, I am obviously aware of the fact that he was, uh, he had help from War Machine, but I'm fairly certain that each one of those robots was more advanced than the suit that Stain had in Iron Man 1. And in the Avengers movie, his suit towards the end of the film can deal serious damage to an army from outer space that was sent there specifically to get the Infinity Stones. Hello, Abdullah. How's it going? Also, thank you to those who have all given me likes. We are now up to 3. I guess the answer to all of this is that as usual, it's talking about things related to Marvel, namely Iron Man. But I posed the question, what if Tony Stark didn't become Iron Man? What if he instead took that technology and built suits to help construction workers, astronauts, scientists when they go on, shall we say, expeditions, like if they explore underwater caverns, if they go to learn more about volcanoes. Why didn't he use that technology to build prosthetic limbs for people who, are amputees? Why didn't he build suits for the police and, the SWAT, the FBI SWAT, possibly even Secret Service? Because that's helping people. Right? Like, okay, yeah, he needed the Iron Man suit in the first movie to right his wrongs. And it makes sense that he couldn't trust anyone. Because... Exactly. It makes sense that he did that in the first movie because he really didn't know who to trust. And maybe that's the point. he was already pretty untrustworthy. And then when Stain, who was like a father to him, reveals that he's the reason Tony was in that cave, and Tony was never supposed to make it out of that cave alive, and then takes the arc reactor, endangering his life, and, tries to harm Pepper and innocent lives. Maybe that is what was the final nail, or the final lid on the pot, where he decided, okay, if even a man who I saw as a father figure, who was a close friend of my father's and one of the founders of the company, could turn out to be a monster, then there is no one I can trust. But again, at that point, you keep a suit for yourself and you build stuff for others as well. And your only stipulation would be, I will not build things for the military, but I will build things for law enforcement. I will build things to help hospitals. Right? Because this is a man that I'm fairly certain built all those robots that you see in the first movie, right? Remember the one that he kept saying, you're on fire duty? Pretty sure he built that robot. Which tells you that Tony Stark could have created not just robo vests like you suggested. Great suggestion, by the way. Not just maybe, Ironman suits for like SWAT teams, but also AI programs to help with things like research and help doctors take care of patients. Because he built Jarvis. And if he, really feels the need to keep something on himself just in case he's targeted, all right. That makes sense. But if he came to an agreement once again with the government and said, look, I need you to put this in writing. I'll agree to your terms if you agree to some of mine. And he could have even had Rhodey in on that to kind of speak with him, speak for him, help him out there. Maybe what he would say is, because I already said this at the beginning of the stream, but since I imagine you weren't here at the time, he'd say, I need to be in on everything that has to do with those suits. I need to be the person who's responsible for all sales that have to do with them. I need to be the one who tests them, right? Me and Rhodes here, we're going to be the ones that test every single suit. We need to make sure they don't get into the wrong hands, and we need to make sure that everyone is trained in how to use them. And another part of the agreement would be I want to use versions of this technology, versions of these suits for non-military purposes. So basically, Iron Man suits that don't have weapons on them. Heck, instead of weapons, maybe he could have outfitted certain Iron Man suits with like drills, right? Because weapons come out of compartments on those suits, right? Maybe that could have been one of the compartments on an Iron Man suit that's built for construction work. Maybe it could have explosives designed just for demolition purposes. Maybe it could have some kind of welding device that comes out of the arm and is used for that purpose, right? A nail gun, saws, that sort of thing. And each suit would be built for a specific job in relation to construction work. I could see the laser weapon or laser technology that he puts into um, the Mark 6 in Iron Man 2 being used for surgical purposes. Work alongside of physicians, work alongside of surgeons, and use that technology to, advance surgery. Maybe use, the onboard computer in the Iron Man helmets for, advanced imaging. So, like, better MRIs, that sort of thing. Hello there, Kelda Sweeney. How's it going? Glad to hear that. You're gonna see the stream stutter just a moment, but I want to check something.